Come up here a second, if you would, Carolyn. And I'd love you to say a few words. It's been my honor over the last couple of years to get to know Carolyn Hill. She is the chairperson of the East Baton Rouge Parish Democratic Party. We're delighted to have you here. Why don't you say a few words?
Well, it's with great honor to be here this afternoon to listen to the discussion. And I know Representative Edmond Jordan and Mr. Cleve Dunn Jr. do an outstanding job. But I just want to thank Mr. Jenkins because we have done some collaborative work together. And I think the work that we have done together within the community have actually unified the community in some areas, especially with voter registration, etc. So it's an honor to be here, and thank you once again.
We want to thank you all for coming today. I think there's important things happening in our community, and one has been the concern after the shooting of Alton Sterling and then our police officers who were killed. It has a lot of people thinking, a lot of introspection, a lot of questions, a lot of calls for reform. And I think it's important that we all listen to one another and have a constructive dialogue, and that's why we invited some leaders to come today who can give their perspective on the events that have occurred and their suggestions for change. And we'll give them an opportunity to say a few words and have some questions and answers and see where we go from there. But I want to thank them all for coming, and two of them are good friends of mine. One gentleman I haven't only met just recently, and so I'm delighted to get to know him better. But the first is Cleve Dunn Jr. Cleve is a local business owner. Representative Edmond Jordan, who is an attorney here and state legislator, and Geno McLaughlin, who's a community activist. So I'm going to ask that each person speak for about 7 minutes, and then at the end we'll open it for questions for all. So you can choose your order and come on up. Cleve Dunn first.
Good afternoon, everyone. I don't necessarily need 7 minutes, but I'll get right into it. Again, my name is Cleve Dunn Jr. I want to first thank Woody for inviting me here, not only this time, but also last year. Woody and I had some dialogue during the aftermath of the killing of Alton Sterling about our community, not just North Baton Rouge or not just South Baton Rouge, but our community as a whole. We both felt that there was a lot of mixed messages going out through media and hearsay, and we thought it'd be good to come together, white, black, Republican, Democrat, North and South, to kind of have an open dialogue and discussion about some of the issues that our community face. Some of the protests, some of the concerns of residents and other stakeholders in the community. We did that on last year, and I think it gave us a platform to communicate to residents all over this parish what the protest was about, what the concerns of citizens was about, and I think it gave us a clear direction and an understanding of what everything was going on in the summer of 2016 as it relates to the protest. We talked this year in anticipation of the verdict being released and thought it'd be a good idea to do this again. State Representative Edmond Jordan came last year, State Rep Ted James, I think Eugene Collins was here, and a host of other leaders who are actively involved in the movement for justice for Alton Sterling and his family, as well as police reform. As we move forward this year, one of the things I don't see the media reporting much on or people talking about is some of the advancements that we've made. And I think most of those advancements were made because of the protests, because of the outcry of citizens and residents wanting to see change. Let me first start by saying this. The right to protest is a constitutional right. That's a constitutional right that we all have to exercise. And if you think back last time, most people were concerned because when you had a situation like a killing of a black man by a law enforcement officer in other cities, those cities imploded. They burned, they tore things down. I firmly believe from the beginning that we had the business owner leadership, the elected official leadership, the faith-based leadership, and the community leadership to handle that moment last year and to handle this moment this year. I think we proved that last year. We didn't implode, and that didn't happen by chance. That happened because it was people like myself, Geno McLaughlin, Ted James, State Rep Jordan, Councilman Cole, that was there working with our people, helping us to process the anger, the frustration in a constructive manner. that presence still exists this year. And again, just like I had confidence in our community last year, I have that same confidence in our community this year, that we will again handle the moment. Now, some of the outcry and some of the protests, some of our elected officials have responded to those cries. They have brought policies and proposed legislation, some of the issues that the community has outcried about. And I'm going to go over some of that stuff because I don't think much talk is being said about that. Some of you guys may remember some of the police reform ordinance that were brought before the Metro Council last year. It was 5 or 6 of them by Councilwoman Shauna Banks. She brought legislation or ordinance to the Metro Council, and some felt it was too soon, it was insensitive to the police officers after the killing. But she brought that legislation. That wasn't easy for her. I want to take my hat off to her. Now, all of those things didn't pass, but one of them did pass. And that was the funds released by the Metro Council to hire an agency to help with diversifying the police department. So I want to make sure we notate that. The other thing is, because of the outcry and the advocacy, this past election cycle was very important. We had a previous administration that didn't want to touch any of this police reform stuff and didn't act on it. So we elected a mayor that was sensitive to the needs and the outcry of the community, and Sharon Weston Broome addressed some of this stuff. Within 30 days, by executive order, she enacted, she put together her advisory committee, which I serve on as it relates to police reform, and that consisted of community members, business owners, and as well as law enforcement officers. So we had a dialogue and a discussion, and we came up with some suggestions as it relates to police officer engagement. And that was enacted within 30 days. I'm sure some of you guys have seen that. Previously, then Councilwoman Marcel, now State Representative Marcel, convened the Body Cam Committee, which I also serve on. And we studied that issue. We looked at different vendors and models. And matter of fact, the officers who was involved in the killing with Alton Sterling had on some body cameras that was a part of that pilot program. But again, the previous administration didn't prioritize appropriating the funds to make body cameras available for every Baton Rouge police officer. Well, our mayor now, Mayor Sharon Weston Broome, has prioritized that, and she has appropriated $2.5 million to outfit every law enforcement officer on the Baton Rouge Police Department with body cameras. As we know, confrontations with black and brown individuals and law enforcement officers, not only local but all throughout this country, has been an issue. And body cameras bring transparency to what goes on in those encounters. It protects the law enforcement officer and also protects the citizen which they encounter. So that's some policy that has been brought forth. Also, and I don't want to steal State Representative Jordan's thunder, but him along with State Representative Ted James are proposing some criminal justice reform in the state legislature right now. So I won't get into detail about that. I'll save that for him. But one thing I want to say is what we want a government, we want a state representative, we want a mayor, we want a senator that's going to respond to the needs and the outcry of the people. And I think because of the protests and the outcry, some of our elected officials have responded to the outcry and wanted to address some of this stuff to bring about change. When we talk about other places that have had issues with similar to a killing of a black man or black woman by a law enforcement officer, we've seen protests. But one thing I want to tell you is, and correct me if I'm wrong, media, not very many places have taken protests to policy change. We've done that here in Baton Rouge. We've taken protests to change in policy, and we know the policy is what's going to what the officers are going to adhere to. We're going to protest, we're going to speak out, that's fine, but we also want to change policy. And we've done that here in Baton Rouge, and that's due to a lot of work of a lot of men and women who are not here today. So I want to make sure we notate that. That's all I have today. I welcome your questions and your concerns after Geno McLaughlin comes up and State Representative Edmond Jordan. Next year, hear from Geno McLaughlin. Walter also was one of the 6 individuals, aside from the family, that the Department of Justice spoke with and briefed in detail about the investigation of the shooting of Alton Sterling. So he'll be able to talk to you guys about that experience and what information that they shared with them that they didn't share at the podium with us and the nation. Walter Geno McLaughlin.
I'd like to first thank Woody for inviting me out to speak. As he noted, we actually just recently met, so I actually look forward to getting to meet you and talking with you further as we go along. Again, my name is Walter Geno McLaughlin. By profession, I guess I'm a community outreach specialist here in Baton Rouge. Excuse me, by birth, I'm an artist, singer, and songwriter. And as Woody noted, I am a community activist. So it's always been weird, you know, when they call you a community activist. I actually first saw that in the newspaper one day. I just never been called that before, and so I think it takes a little getting used to. I think a good friend of mine said, "In good times, you're a community leader. In bad times, you're a community activist." Right? So hopefully, I can get back to being called a community leader, or even maybe a community advocate. I think that's maybe a little more appropriate word, because what we try to do as activists or advocates is try to kind of go out into the community, listen to what the fears, what the concerns. Bring that back to the power structure, right? And try to speak to the power structure. Obviously, we have a new mayor, and so we've been able to sit down with her and have dialogue and kind of let her know what the community is thinking, right? And obviously, she's been deliberate this go around, trying to not seem disconnected from the community at large. I think last time that was one of the major concerns that we had with the past administration, was that when the protests broke out, that he was on a plane, he was in Washington, D.C., and he was seen out and about in the community, but not necessarily speaking to the people that were being most affected. And that's not just black people, that's not just protesters, that's even the people who were at home and afraid. And so we've been trying to have that dialogue with community leaders, with politicians, and also just with the community to find out what it is that they would want to have happen and try to bring that back to the leaders. As Cleve stated, I was asked to be in a meeting following the announcement with the Department of Justice, U.S. Attorney Edmond, and also the FBI. One of the things that we learned in that, and I'll be quite honest with you, is that there was a stark contrast between the officers' actions, right? One of the particular officers, Officer Salamone, unfortunately, in their words, they were disturbed by his actions. If they were in law enforcement, they would not like to see any officer on their force act in such a manner. And so, and even to the point where it was said that Officer Lake was, to some degree, even though aggressive, also trying to de-escalate the situation. We did not see that from Officer Salamone. So there was a stark contrast that was drawn between these two officers, as told to us by those officials. And so we even asked them, why are you telling us this, right? Like, because obviously we have a responsibility to the community to go back and say what you said. So if you are truly telling us this, you know that we're going to go back and deliver this to the community that we serve. And so that's actually what they told us that they wanted us to do. They wanted us to go back into the community and let the community know that while they fully reviewed all the evidence at hand, and although they could not, to the standard of civil rights charges, they could not charge these officers under those statutes. However, we might have a very good case, even though obviously they're not trying to advocate for the officers being charged or convicted, but at the same time, just to let us know that a case could be possibly brought about based on the evidence that they reviewed. And so just listening to that information and also being able to take that in, and I know they had spoken to the family previous to that, we went back into the community and let everybody know. We actually sat down with the advocate very recently and were able to kind of lay out a lot of what was said in that meeting, and trying to let everybody know that one, the officers, from our standpoint, listening to all the evidence that they talked to us about, and that's reviewing all 6 different cameras that were involved. We're talking about the 2 from the body cams. We're talking about the confiscated surveillance film that was taken from the store. You have the dash cam, and I think I might be leaving one out there.
There were 6 videos total.
Yeah, six videos total. So after reviewing all that, again, it didn't rise to the level of civil rights charges, because what you have to do with civil rights charges, and I know we have a lawyer in the house, he'll be able to correct me if I'm wrong, you have to be able to prove willful intent. And so, although the officers could not, although the Department of Justice could not prove willful intent, what they could show, what they did see is, again, disturbing actions. For instance, Officer Salomon, from the time he stepped foot onto the ground, remember now, we're talking about 90 seconds. 90 seconds is all we're talking about here. 71 seconds really just interacting with Alton Sterling. And so between 90 seconds from the time that Officer Salomon actually steps foot onto the ground, the first thing he does is walks up to Alton Sterling and puts a gun to his head. And I won't, obviously some of you might have watched the news, so I won't curse here today, but said some expletives and said, "I will effing kill you." And so that being the first words out of an officer's head as he runs up to him. Again, mind you, his hands are on the hood at this particular time. He's interacting with Officer Lake. Salomon comes straight out of his car. First thing he does is put a gun to his head and threaten to kill him. And then 71 seconds later, or a minute and 11 seconds later, Alton Sterling is laying on the ground dead. So when we talk about the facts of this case, we have to remember that this is a very, very, very short amount of time. Very little real interaction, very little directions even given, right? Or they're being given in hostile conditions while they are being given, right? And I don't know about you guys. I've never had a gun put to my head, and I hope never to have that happen to you, but I don't think that I would react the same way with a gun to my head as I am standing up here today, you know. And so I think from the community standpoint, having had, tons and tons of dialogue since going back into the community after that meeting, it's clear that much of the constituency, they're looking for those officers, and actually both officers, to be let go. Because what that is, it sends a signal, right, that we're trying to heal the community. Because what they are is, I think they're a symbol of divisiveness right now, right? And so that's one thing that we've been trying to let administration know, but also let the chief of police know, that the community wants to see those officers go. Beyond that, it's clear that there is a case against Officer Salomon for sure, and possibly even one against Officer Lake, that, you know, we'll let the process play out, and we'll, you know, let the cards fall where they may. But I think Attorney General Jeff Landry has some work to do. I hope that he does a fair and thorough investigation, and hopefully we'll get to the bottom of this. But again, just to, you know, speaking to the people that I speak to on a daily basis, having met with people last night, having a meeting coming up tomorrow and a meeting coming up on Wednesday, my kids have not seen me much since this has happened, but I guess that kind of comes along with being a public servant. You know, I think that's a name I even like better than community activist. And so I think as we try to bring this thing to a close and try to actually bring some healing, because I know a lot of people are worried about that, and that's even one thing that the Department of Justice spoke to us about, was how do we move past this moment? Once, you know, it's in the hands of the Attorney General, once he delivers his rendering, how do we actually bring the community together? And in my job of being a community outreach specialist, that's something that I do well. I've actually been a part of the dialogue on race myself. I've been a part of numerous dialogues out in the community. I think more of that is needed. I know there was, we have a Baton Rouge business report in the house, and this is not to throw stones, you guys, but I know there was an article called "The Futility of Dialogue," and there was also a rebuttal to that by Chris Tyson. I think dialogue is helpful. I think dialogue I think honest dialogue is helpful. Let me put it that way, right? And I think we've seen a lot of that since, you know, the incidents have happened. I think that's a good thing, right? That's a step forward. That's a step in the right direction, because what we're doing is we're being honest with each other. We're telling our real feelings about what's happened, about this type of city that we want to see. But then beyond that, like Mr. Dunn spoke to, I think we actually have to have now real policy change, right? And from the other side, and I hate to look at it as like these opposing forces, but to the other side, I think we also have to come to the table and look at it and say, oh, these people aren't protesters, these people aren't bad people, right? I founded a project called Thin Red Line Project, and that's one of the things that we wanted to do with that project was kind of bring some humanity back to the conversation, bring some humanity back maybe to the individuals that live in North Baton Rouge. I don't even live in North Baton Rouge, but to me, we're all one community. We can't have a real community until we have unity. And so to the other side, I think we have to bring those conversations to the table and stop maybe looking to vilify and to demonize individuals, but maybe look to actually hear their story, right? And through that project, Thin Red Line Project, that's one of the things that we found is that listening to the stories of individuals, what that does is it actually brings some of that humanity back. And you realize that these are loving individuals, these are families, these are hardworking families, these are people that bleed the same, just like you. They want the same things for their families, and they want the same things for their kids that I'm sure everybody in this room wants. And so, when we think about North Baton Rouge, it's this huge swath of land. It's not some, it's not some one neighborhood. It is a huge area of land with different spirits, different individuals, and they're creative and they're business owners. And so we just want to kind of bring everybody to that table and say, okay, here's some real policies that we think that we can work on. Here's some real policies that we think we can achieve. And that's what we've been hearing from the community at large. Obviously, first and foremost, they want to see the officers fired, to be honest with you. From there, they want to see a fair and transparent investigation. And then from there, it's clear for sure that Officer Salamone that charges, there's a good case for charges to be brought against him, and then even possibly Officer Lake as well. So again, I thank you guys for your time, and thank you for inviting me out, and turn it over to State Representative Edmond Jordan. Thank you.
Now, those other two guys said they were going to be brief.
No,
I truly intend to be brief. But it's always a pleasure when Woody invites me over. Let me start by saying this, and I think Geno and Cleve both hit on this, but there was a discussion I had with an individual last week before the decision came out, because everybody knew that there were rumors of decisions before the Washington Post article came out. And the guy asked me, he said, what's the discussion and what's the feel in your community? And I know he didn't mean it in a negative way. I don't think he had any malice in his heart when he said it, but my response to him was, look, respectfully, that's the problem. It's not my community, it's not your community, it's our community. We're one community here in Baton Rouge. And that's one of the reasons why I always enjoy coming, because for whatever differences politically or philosophically that we might have, Woody is always, and in my conversations I can say, it's always been the idea that we're one community. And so I certainly thank you for that. But that being said, when last year came about, it certainly was a difficult time between the Sterling shooting and the shooting with the police officers. It was a lot of tragedy. In that, we started talking about policy decisions, and Cleve and I started earlier, and we said, look, we can't let this be a moment that we don't at least have something positive that comes out of this. And so a bunch of us, and these guys, you can hear them, they're articulate, they're smart, they're really good with ideas, and I've always said there's no patent on ideas. Nobody can have a patent on good ideas. We all can bring that to the table. And so we said, what do we need to do? Because out of all of this, whether it was Ferguson, whether it was South Carolina, whether it was going in New York, we really hadn't seen any positive policy decisions come out of that. So I got with Ted and I and some other legislators and said, okay, what do we need to do? Because not only do we want something to come out of this positively, but we also want to send a message to the community that we are doing something, that we are responding to your cry. And so out of that, we had a few bills that came out. Ted James has a couple of bills. One that deals with increasing the training for officers to become post-certified. He has another one that decreases the time that an officer has to hire an attorney. Like right now, an officer needs, he has up to 30 days to hire an attorney if he has charges filed against him or a complaint against him. That would reduce the time, his bill would reduce the time to 14 days. We also have now that Senator Barrow has brought about a bill that deals with creating a database. So now every time a complaint or charges are filed against an officer, that will go into a database. And so we'll be able to track that. And then we also have a bill that says that if you are convicted, that you are subject to losing your certification. Or if you're found, let me not even say convicted because that's criminal, but if you're found that the complaint was warranted, you could be subject to losing your certification. And then along with that, I decided I wanted to come up with a couple of bills, and I was, reading and I started looking at some of the issues that constantly pop up that are some consistent themes. And one thing, we already have a right under the First Amendment to film police officers or any public official in the performance of their official capacities. But mostly this is related to police officers. So you have a right, if you have everybody, I'm looking around, everybody has their smartphones out. So as long as you're not interfering with the officer and effectuating his arrest, as long as you're not invading somebody's privacy, you could take that phone and you could film him in the performance of his duties, right? You already, the Supreme Court has said that. There's a case out of Massachusetts that says that all the circuits say that, including the Fifth Circuit in which we live, they said that. But still, it's not known by, frankly, it's not known by a lot of police officers. If you look at people say, well, that I was bringing this out of the Alton Sterling decision or the case. And I'm like, no, not really. That's part of it. But if you saw the Varsity Theater deal that happened last year, and there was a guy named Daniel Clinton, happened with him. Recently, there was a young lady in Denham Springs where a police officer snatched the phone from her when she wasn't doing anything else but just filming him in the performance of his duty. So it really is one thing so that we can put everybody on notice that this is already law according to the Constitution, but we also want to bring it in so that everybody's just aware and we put it down. We're going to put it in the statutes. We're going to codify it, right? Then I started talking to young men in the community, and I talked to police officers as well. And one thing we found that was interesting is when you're pulled over, there's a time where there's this tension between the driver and the officer. And it's usually when the officer said, you know what, Edmond, we get anxious when we can't see their hands. So, and I started talking to drivers. And drivers said, well, we get anxious when they can't see our hands as well. So, but when does that happen? When you're pulled over, one of the first things an officer asks for is your insurance and your registration. Well, where is that kept? Where do most people keep that? Glove box. So if I'm reaching over into my glove box, if you're the officer, what can't you do? Can't see my hands. If I'm the driver, I know that he can't see my hands. But I see that he has his holster unclipped and he's ready, right? So that's a tense situation for all of us. So I started looking around. I said, you know what, how can we alleviate that problem? Well, we already, Senator Ward, who is one of the senators from West Baton Rouge and Nicolville, they already have a database now where they can see license plate whether or not you have insurance. They can do that in real time. Now, why officers still ask for your insurance information, I don't know, because they really can tell. Frankly, they can tell by looking at your license plate. Now, if the plates are stolen or something, that's a different. But 90% of the time, they're able to do that. So I started a search, and I found that New York has the vehicle registration is actually a barcode right underneath the inspection sticker. So we started talking a little bit more about it, and Texas actually has the information on the inspection sticker. So I said, well, let's try to do something similar to that. So I proposed another bill that we have filed that would put the vehicle information on the inspection sticker. So your vehicle registration would be there. And when, frankly, I got a couple of emails from constituents. They said, they thought it was frivolous legislation, but didn't really understand the point behind it. And then I had some guys, Jeff Albright with Big I and some other folks came and talked to me and wanted to know exactly what was the purpose of the legislation. But once I explained it, because they thought, well, who's going to be responsible for this? What's going to be the cost associated with it? How are we going to do this? But they thought it was for a totally different purpose. But once I really explained the reasoning behind it, it's kind of like I see in this room. I just saw you say, it's like one of those aha moments. Okay, yeah, I get it. I understand what you're trying to do. And I think everybody is on board with it. I'll be truthful. It's not perfect legislation at this point. We may need to tweak it a little bit. But it's the idea that we prevent the reach. Because it's in highway and transportation in that committee, but it really is a criminal justice reform issue. Because if we can prevent the reach, we save officers because, again, not only do you keep your vehicle registration and your insurance in your glove compartment, what else do you keep in your glove compartment or under your seat? Your gun. Your gun, that's right. So, in fairness to the officer, when you're reaching, he doesn't know he knows what he's asked for, but he doesn't necessarily know what you're reaching for. And if I'm an African American, mostly males, this apply, but if I'm sitting in that seat and I'm reaching for that information, I don't want to pull that registration or insurance out too quickly. You understand what I'm saying? Because I don't know what his response is going to be. So if we can avoid that, then I think that I will say this to you. If it can save one life, I think it's well worth it. So, we are trying to make efforts to improve our entire community. Because again, like I said, this is one community, this is one Baton Rouge, this is one Baton Rouge region. So I don't care if you're from West Baton Rouge, if you're from Iberville, if you're from East Baton Rouge, Ascension, Point Coupee. I'm sure I'm leaving one of the parishes, one of the other local parishes out. But the point is this. We all have lots of things in common. We need to focus first on the things that we have in common, and then we can argue about the things that we don't. But I always say this. You and I can disagree on how we get there, but if I genuinely know that your heart is in the right place and you want to improve our region and I want to improve our region, then that's a discussion I'm willing to have. I'll leave you with this. Today, I was coming from Brewley. There was a wreck on the new bridge. So to get here, I had to go to Old Bridge. But whether you go to Old Bridge or whether you get on the new bridge, if you ended up at Cafe Americana, we ended up at the same place, right? And so ultimately, we want to end up in the same place, and that's to improve our state and to make it better. And so if we can focus on that and go into a discussion in that mindset, I think we're going to improve Baton Rouge tremendously, and we're going to improve the state tremendously. And so even out of the most tragic of situations, I hope to see the light at the end of the rainbow.
We're going to have some questions. I'm going to kick off the questions, and I'm going to try to zero in on the heart of the current controversy, and that is the performance of his duties by Officer Salomon. If we could stop for a moment and just forget the race of the people involved. Let's forget Alton Sterling's black, the officers are white, and just see them as all black or all white, whatever we want to do, but all the same. Try to imagine it then. We have a call to the police station saying that someone is making a threat. I think because he's wearing a red shirt, he's making a threat with a gun. An officer is called out, another comes out. When I first saw the video that came out, I was very disturbed, and I thought, this looks like police misconduct. I actually changed my mind after I heard the Department of Justice report. But here is an individual who has been convicted of a felony. It's illegal for him to have a gun at all. It's illegal for him to have a concealed weapon, whether he's a felon or not. The particular complaint raised is that Officer Salamone was too rough and that he was threatening. He says, "I'm going to kill you," and that he didn't escalate, that he did not de-escalate the situation. Now, let me play the devil's advocate for just a minute and say, all right, he said, "I'm going to kill you." Was that because he intended to kill him, or because he was using that as a way to ensure compliance? Was it to make sure that he didn't have to kill him, because he would put the man in fear that something might happen so that he would comply? That's the first part of it. The second thing I want to mention, when you say he did not de-escalate, my understanding is that after he had drew his gun, he later, when Alton Sterling withdrew his hands from the vehicle, that he actually holstered his weapon, and then that's when they had a tussle. He did de-escalate because he holstered his weapon. Isn't that true? So give me your comments about that.
So let me start by a couple of things. One, it's interesting. It's very difficult to take race out of the equation, but if I would, just for the sake of this discussion, the officers didn't know who Alton Sterling was, so they didn't know he was a felon. So let's look at it. So let's back up. So I don't know somebody's a felon. Now, we do have a constitutional right to carry a firearm, right? We can open carry. I know, because I'm going through it point by point. So we could open carry in Louisiana without a permit. That's right. You can carry a concealed weapon with a permit. Now, they didn't ask the question whether or not he had a permit or even whether he had a gun. All right? So they knew that based on the call, based on the tip. I think that was a safe assumption, which later proved to be true. But I think you're making respectfully making some conclusory assertions and attributing them to the officers that giving them let me say this, I think you're giving them a benefit of the doubt that they don't necessarily deserve at this point. Because we don't know what their state of mind was. We do know what was reported to them. But let me say this lastly. If I, not being an officer, say that I'm going to kill you, and less than a minute and a half later I kill you, I'm going to be charged with premeditated murder. Now, the fact that he did holster his gun, I don't necessarily think it de-escalated the situation, but it did go to the willful intent portion of the element of the crime for the civil rights violation. That's one reason why the Fed said it didn't meet their burden for what they would charge him with. But I think we got to be very careful though, because I will tell you this. I've talked to oath keepers. And I don't know how many of you in the room are familiar with oath keepers, but they're a group that protects the Second Amendment. They believe in the Second Amendment, and in fact, in Louisiana, we have the Second Amendment is very strong here in Louisiana. We have a fundamental right to firearms. So the problem with that is that's not universally applied. So I'm going to deviate from your assumption just for a minute, because that's selectively enforced, or that's a right that's selectively enjoyed, because some folks are going to be allowed to open carry, and there would be no question. They could walk out on College Drive right now and nobody would think anything about it. Others, if we walked out with an open carry, a pistol on our side in the middle of College Drive or on Jefferson Highway, there might be a different response.
I would first start by addressing your question by refusing to take color and race out of it, because you're asking me to look at a situation that don't exist. We are here. This is our reality. So color and race is a part of the situation. For me, I'm not a law enforcement officer, but when Officer Salamone gets out of his vehicle, he escalates, in my opinion, right away when he puts the gun to his head. One point Edmond made, a lot of the things you brought up, like him being a convicted felon and some of those things, they wasn't privy to that information. All they knew was someone had a gun. Someone had a gun open in plain view, which again is legal in the state of Louisiana. Go back to one of those ordinances that was brought by Councilwoman Shauna Banks. And I know a lot of people had some issues with the residency requirement. And I think whether you're black or white and you are of a community and you know the community, you may know the gentleman that sells fruit, CDs, or what have you on a particular corner store. So there may be some familiarity when you get a call to say, hey, we're having an issue at this store. So that's why I'm a proponent for residency requirements. Just that cultural competence and that understanding of knowing what goes on in a community that you live in. You can't reinforce that anymore, how valuable that is to community policing. And right now we don't have that. So I won't take race out of it. I will keep race in it. And it is what it is. The situation is what it is. I don't think Officer Salamone's actions are in compliance with the best practices of de-escalation or approaching a subject or a citizen in the act of duty. Matter of fact, the Department of Justice reinforced that to us, the general public, as well as to the family and the 6 citizens privately. So that's my response to that.
So, more questions?
Well, let me, before you do that, let me respond. I just want to ask Woody, ask you a question. If you had seen a videotape with doesn't matter whether it's a white officer or a black officer who jumped out of his car and immediately put his gun to the head of a white person, what would be the response and the outcry to that? Whether it was white or black officer, you would say, I think, and I don't want to speak for this, why I'm asking the question, but I knowing you the way I think you would say that was a violation of that man's constitutional rights.
Well, here we had a call that was for someone was threatening another person with a firearm. It was a person doing the threatening was the person in the red shirt. So the officers were coming because they knew if someone had a gun, they have to assume it's armed, and that person was threatening. So as far as the reaction, black or white, I have a hard time generalizing about that. I can tell you my reaction. My reaction is, if somebody points a gun to my head and it tells me to comply, I'm going to comply. That's common sense. I mean, I don't want anything to happen, so, and particularly if he has a uniform on and he tells me to do something, he doesn't have to point a gun at my head. I'm going to comply. But all the more so if he does. The fact that someone would not comply is telling me there's a problem. There's either drugs or a mental state or something that would make the person not comply with an officer's commands.
Well, can I say something? I want to say something as a person that is a 10-year veteran police officer in California in the 3rd highest gang population. Florida, #1 safest city in the world, so I had both extremes. I've been in those situations where I've gotten a call that I'm getting chills right now, just, what am I going to, who I'm going to go see. There's a way that, my backup was far away, that I can tell somebody, I'm here to do a job, I've got a family, and if I have to kill you, I'm going to kill you. I don't need to run up to him and put my gun to him. I don't need to pull my gun out and show it to him. I can just let him know, hey, look, he knows it's a serious situation if he is a criminal or what his background is. Before we know, again, he doesn't know why I'm there particularly. I don't know why he's there, other than what I'm told, what he knows he's done. But I can let the person know This is a serious situation. This is what I'm gonna do to protect myself. I gotta do what I have to do. This is always much more complex than we could ever know until we're in that situation. And I treated everybody as best I could the same way if I thought that they were a person that was gonna cause me violence. But just to answer that very small thing that he had, what to do if the person has a gun when you go in there, because you could go on forever, all the different facets, but this one small facet of, did he have to run up to him and put the gun up against his head? I wasn't there, I don't know what their interaction was. For me personally, in those situations that I've been in, I've been able to communicate to that person, I'm here to do a job. If that means that I have to shoot you, I will, but I'd like to resolve this without doing that.
Let me say this. There's no policy or procedure expert, and you support as expert, who's looked at that video and says that that's acceptable. Nobody says, in the law enforcement community, let me be very clear about that. Nobody says that that's acceptable. In fact, they say it's unacceptable.
I want to say that I want to applaud each and every one of you all for doing what you're doing. As a former elected official, I think all you all my friends, you know that. To me, public safety was number one as a public official. Police, fire. If they needed something, if they needed the support of the elected officials, then I was there to support them. Now, I supported them when they were right. Now, if they're wrong, that's a horse of a different color. You can't paint a whole department just by the reaction of one person. Let me tell you why. Because they put their lives on the line every day to protect us. We call them. They don't call us. When they have a problem in the community, we pick up the phone and we call them. Somebody called those officers. And they told them that there was a problem. And those officers responded. And I say it to say this to you, as African American men, I applaud what you're doing, brother, because we got problems in our community. And let me tell you why we have problems. That's why I'm outspoken. I want you all to do it. You all young, man. I'm an old man now. But no, seriously, I'm 63. But I walk the same streets that those guys walk every day, guys that you all are talking about. When you start implementing your policy, make sure that there's a provision in that policy that says we're going to hold the police responsible, but we also going to hold you responsible for your action. Now let me tell you why. You can't just go out and implement policies and procedures to tie the hands of police officers. And I mean that. You have to, it has to be in the middle of the road type of thing. They have to be loose enough to do their job, to do it very well, not to abuse power, but at the same time, that person on the other end, be it African American, Hispanic, white, I don't care who it is, that person has to understand what the rules and regulations are and have to comply. That's what I think that we need to do. And then the last thing I want to say, as you implement your policy, and Cleve, you with the mayor, old man Woody do was, he had it right. Let me tell you why he had it right. Because when I was coming up to South Baton Rouge, Woody had a division up there dealing with youth and youth opportunity. Brother, listen, they don't have nothing to do but walk the street and shoot each other, fight each other, and those type of things. I want to say this, and now this is going to be hard-wrenching as an African American, and this is what disturbed me more than anything else. When that rapper got shot the other day, and he died 2 days later, my wife and I, we were talking. Nobody marched, and nobody made a comment. When an African American kill another African American, we don't open our mouths. When the clerk of court was discriminated against 10 whites from Denver Springs, and I said something, and Sarah, we didn't open our mouth. We have to understand one thing. It's just not one way in society. If we're going to be one community, the law is going to apply for all of us. And I say that, and I once again, I like what you're doing. I understand it. But be even-handed across the bow, and I think then the whole community will buy in if we're going to have policies that fit all.
See, let me respond to that. I think all of us want to address it. First, Darryl, I would say that we're not looking for single accountability. We're looking for dual accountability. If you're a construction worker and you have a job that you're working on and someone gets hurt or killed, you're liable. If you're a practicing attorney and you misrepresent a client, you're liable. If you are a nurse or a doctor and someone dies while under your care, you're liable. And we want law enforcement officers to have the same liability. No profession, no individual should be removed from that same accountability. So no doubt, we want dual accountability. We want accountability on both parts. Edmond talked about the encounter when a police officer pulls over a citizen. Both of those individuals, the law enforcement officer and the citizen, have one goal in mind: leaving that encounter intact and getting back home to their families. And I thought this gentleman made some good points, but one of the things that really resonated with me, he said, if I have to kill you, I'm gonna kill you. You know, and I don't think that the resident or the citizens enters those encounters saying, if I have to kill the police to get away from here, I'm gonna kill him. I think both the law enforcement officer and the resident should be saying, what can I do to make sure both of us get home to our families? And that's both of them have a responsibility to de-escalate the situation.
Let me speak to one of those issues too. When we talk about the dual responsibility, right? If I go kill somebody today, I'm going to jail, right? Depending on what the circumstances are, right? There are laws that are already in place that dictate most of society. What we're asking for are specific policies, right, in regards to the police, because unfortunately, there's been a long history of not seeing justice in particular communities, and we can go far, far, far back, and we can see instances where, you know, people from one particular community or from one particular profession, whether it be law enforcement or white people, where they might lynch or where they might kill a black person, and those laws are not upheld rather. And so you have to first ask yourself why. We know the reasons why, and so what we have to do then is put particular and specific and be intentional about the policies that we put in place to not have an environment where we have a man or a kid or anybody killed and we just blame the victim every single time. Because the only time that really happens is if it comes from people of color, you know. And so I think we have to really think about this whole society that we live in, right? And the systems that were created to kind of put people in classes and put people in places of less than. And so when something happens to them, all we do is we vilify, we demonize those individuals, rather than maybe looking at the officers that we pay and that we train, to actually do a service. And instead of just saying, oh, well, they have a hard job. Of course they have a hard job, right? But they also sign up to do a hard job, and they also sign up to do that job well. And so we just want them to be held accountable as well. My daughter, she asked me when all this was going on, and many of you might have to have those conversations with your young children, right? My daughter asked me, as I was trying to explain to her what was going on, because undoubtedly they were going to have those conversations at school. Are all police officers bad? And I said, of course not. Of course not. What I likened it to was when she sees a dog, whether it's big or small, what happens is she just clenches up, right? She didn't even understand why she clenches up. She didn't know why she's so afraid. It's just a natural reaction that she has. And so what I explained to her is some people, well, all of us have these implicit biases, right? And some of those are on full display all of the time, whether they know it or not, right? I don't necessarily know that. I don't know that he showed up there that day and said, I'm going to kill me a black man today, right? But what we do know is that he showed up, and the first thing that he said was he's going to kill a man. And that's what he followed through and did. And so what I was trying to explain to her is the same way that you react when you see that dog, you just naturally clench up. Sometimes certain individuals, because of their implicit biases, they react differently when they see a black man. We've seen it before when you were talking about Reagan, right? I think it was in South Carolina. A young man was told by the police officer to hand him his license and registration. He went to go get his license and registration, and in seconds he was shot 4 times. And so these are the things that many of you are not fearful of, but we have to be fearful of. You know, I've been stopped by police for a license plate issue, and the first thing they did with my kids in the car, they came out on both sides with guns drawn. I had to jump out the car and say I have kids in the car, and I can only imagine, you know, what would have happened. I was afraid for my life first of all when I jumped out the car, because I knew I was jumping into harm's way, but I also knew that I had kids in that car. And so these are things that sometimes other individuals from different communities, that they don't even have to think about those things, you know, so.
We are a little over time now, but let's let Eugene ask the final question, and then we're gonna wrap up.
I have one point here.
Oh, okay. We'll let you two, go ahead.
How y'all doing today? My name is Reverend Eugene Collins, and I'm gonna make sure I say Reverend. I'm gonna have to apologize afterwards, because y'all might be more likely to forgive me. But to my brother right there, you know, when we talk about black on black crime, I agree with you, man. There's not enough being done there. But let's not mix the two fights. They're two very separate fights. Black on black crime is a fight of economic development. Black on black crime is a fight of poor educational outcomes. Black on black crime is a fight of more effective churches. But this is a bit of a different fight. They don't correlate in reason in any way. And you know, my question to you would be that around, you know, what is normal police procedure? I think we have a tendency to overcomplicate things at times. And excuse me, I'm going to say exactly what the officer said. I will fucking kill you. Is that a normal part of any police procedure? And I ask you, if somebody came and put a gun in your head and told you the same thing, would you comply easily? My question goes along with that. Not a question, it's a policy change. These officers are in so much stress all the time, and if they're constantly working in difficult areas, in high crime areas, which I hate to say, they are stressed out. You need to rotate these men in and out and give them psychological testing so they're not stressed out. I mean, when I get stressed after week, I will sometimes explode. I'm saying, I need some time off. They must do this if they're not doing it already. Very simple. You get rotate in and out of these areas. I thought about Baltimore, that Baltimore situation. They knew that guy was a drug dealer, 16, you know, so they were after him. They knew ahead of time they were after him. I understand Mr. Sterling did not have, I was told that he did have a record. You're saying he did not have a record.
No, he did have a record.
Okay, so then these guys were
They
uptight.
didn't know he was a felon in possession of a firearm is what I'm telling you.
So anyways, the bottom line is, it would be interesting to see how long Salomon was on that beat for months and months, stress, you know, and if he had been given some time off, a couple weeks here, a couple weeks there, we'll get him in on.
Let me address that. And the DOJ didn't say this, so I don't know this to be factual. So let me just say that up front. But it's rumored that that was not his normal area of patrol. Remember, this happened on July 5th. Where are most of the officers for the 4th of July?
At home.
At work in the levee. They're working the celebration. So I don't know that necessarily to be factual. I'm sure that's something that's going to come out, but I'm not sure that was their normal area beat. The second thing is this: usually when you go into a situation like that, the easiest thing to do is to have a show of force. Because if you have a show of force and you have more than 2 officers, and you might have 6 officers, well, that has shown to make somebody get more into compliance than putting a gun to their head, frankly. If you had that, but because of just the time and the date that it happened, I'm not sure if that, you know, was available to the officers as well. What I'll say is this. The other thing I'll say is 2 things. To Darrell's point, you should see more outcry, but you don't see more outcry because, frankly, I think we got to look at this concept of justice. If there's black on black crime and then the perpetrator is arrested, at least even in the victim's family's mind, there's some sense of justice that's being served. Here, and in these cases with the officers, not that they hadn't been convicted, they hadn't even been indicted. They hadn't even, you know, hadn't even gone before a grand jury. You know, there's a certain sense of justice or lack thereof that people feel about. And let me go to this. The data clearly shows that on lots of crimes, there's selective prosecution. If you go to the reports that deal for marijuana, for instance, I tell people all the time, I never smoked marijuana a day in my life. But the data is becoming so overwhelming, it's hard for me to ignore that it should be legalized, not for necessarily for the medicinal purposes, but for purposes that deal with police encounters with young African American men. Look, blacks and whites, this is the data. So this is not Edmond Jordan saying this. This is scientifically proven. Blacks and whites, and I'm using this as one example, smoke marijuana at the same rate. Blacks are 7 times more likely to be arrested and 9 times more likely to be convicted for possession of marijuana. Why is that? Because there's selective enforcement in the communities. If you go into some of the communities in North Baton Rouge that I serve, or in South Baton Rouge down where you grew up, you know that cops are over there looking for that. If I'm over here in Bocage and I'm in my house smoking a joint, you can rest assured nobody's coming knock on my door and bother me. And so those are the realities that we got to deal with. One other thing. I don't think anybody here has said that all police are bad or that even the Baton Rouge Police Department is bad. I think we've talked about 2 individuals in particular. And when it comes to my bill, I don't think my bill handcuffs officers. In fact, I did it with police officers in mind to try to ensure their safety while still ensuring the safety of the people inside the building. And I'll end with this. To the point of making a law enforcement or a police officer's job more difficult. That certainly is not the intent. But I will tell you, there are certain things that we could do to make a law enforcement's job easier, but it might violate the Constitution. We could beat people and get confessions. It would make their jobs easier, but it would violate the Constitution. We have a framework of the Constitution that we got to work within. And we can't start going down that slippery slope where we say it's okay to violate people's constitutional rights in an effort to make law enforcement jobs easier. If we start going down that slippery slope, we're going to be in a lot of trouble.
Well,
and I can tell you, I'm going to protect the Constitution.
Amen to that.
Let's respond a second. First of all, I don't take good kind of lectures now. Not to me. I'm talking about institutional knowledge. See, what you all are seeing today is what we need. That's why we all friends. We need to get behind closed doors and get this institutional knowledge. Brothers, let me tell you something else. You talk about can't mix the two. When you clean up your own community and you start taking responsibility for your actions, these young men that you all trying to make them do, I understand that. That's why I applaud you. So you have to mix the both up. Let's not be no victims here. You understand? As black men, 1.5 million in prison. Don't start giving. I can start giving you some statistics that'll blow your mind. So let's carry this conversation and try to get this institutional knowledge. We can go behind closed doors, and I can tell you, when you start putting policy together, brother, it'll rock Baton Rouge. Because let me tell you something, we will make African American men now start being men again.
I think one of those things, and I agree with you to some extent, to be honest with you, but at the same time, and let's be real about it, we only talk about black on black crime. Have you ever heard the term white on white crime? No. So that was invented to target a specific population, once again. Have you ever heard of Asian on Asian crime? Let's not think that these things don't exist. Almost 90% of white people kill other white people. These are crimes of proximity. And so, yeah, the data might tell you one thing when you mention blacks being in jail, but then we also don't talk about, well, are they being targeted? Are they being unfairly targeted, as Edmond kind of pointed out? So the data can always be skewed, So I took a class in college called statistics, and what they teach you in statistics is that you can read statistics any which way that you want to, right? And so I think we just have to be mindful. Excuse me, I'm sick, so that's why I keep talking like this. We have to be mindful of how we read those statistics and also the terms that we then put in place to kind of justify our actions.
I think Cleve, everyone has spoken except Cleve on the phone.
Cleve, you have my number. Call me. Let's get behind closed doors.
That's why I think these type of dialogues are healthy, because you get different viewpoints and different messages, and we can get in the room and form a consensus. But one thing I would say to your comments, Dad, we cannot ignore the systemic reasons that communities of color are in. I don't want to play the victim either, but we cannot ignore the systemic issues, the history, the 400 years of slavery, segregation, lack of education, lack of economic opportunities that encourage individuals to participate in criminal activity. So we have to address that. And I've been saying this lately, but it's not an either-or conversation for me. It's an and both. So we can address the issues as it relates to law enforcement officers and making sure they're held accountable when they harm or kill somebody, just like an average citizen. And we can also address, cleaning up our community and doing better in our community. So we can do both.
Well, here's a question. I mean, I moved back here after being gone 20 years, and you're not going to see me defend the Baton Rouge Police Department. Haven't had run-ins with them on an inspection sticker where they were wrong and I wasn't. Okay. But my son came to me when all this was going on, because we had been back about a year, and he says, I don't feel comfortable driving around. He's got a little beard, I can't even tell him it looks like, like he ought not look. But at any rate, I said, well, they're as afraid as you are. Put your hands on the steering wheel. If you want to reach for something, ask permission to do it. And I said, whatever he says, whether he's ugly or not, like he was with you and me with the inspection sticker, or whether you're alone, just do what he says. And so I get back to the question that this ain't a black-white thing. This is not was the policeman wrong or anybody right. Did he comply with the police, yes or no?
That's a good question.
And I don't mean that in an ugly way. Because I told my son, you comply with the police in all ways, and you're going to always be safer than if you don't.
But that is your belief. That is not our belief. He mentioned the young man in South Carolina who was instructed to get his driver's license and registration. Got his driver's license and registration, and he was shot and killed. We saw in Florida, there was a social worker who was helping one of his clients. Law enforcement officer asked him to get in the street, put his hands up, still shot him. So whether we're complying or not complying, we're still being shot and sometimes killed.
Well,
oftentimes,
I agree.
when we're not even armed. And we see our white counterparts armed, have killed multiple people, and they're taken into custody without a scratch on their head, and law enforcement still finds time to stop and get them a hamburger before they take them to the police station.
Well, I think anecdotal stories are good, but they're a little beside. I think that my community is only marginally safer than your community, and you've got to just look at the roads and see how lawless it is. I mean, I'm agreeing with you with a lot of this.
I got to stop you though, because now you're making some assumptions. You're saying my community, your community. He may live right next door to you.
Well, no, I mean,
so
one of y'all said, excuse me, wait, you can't have it both ways. One of you said.
Can I have 2 minutes?
Yes, sir, go ahead.
If you don't mind.
Yes.
I know whenever I stand up,
Yes, sir.
We're here at White. So it would be assumed that I'm come from long-term racist, or my generation was. 13 years ago, in East Baton Rouge Parish, 6 of us got together, and we formed an organization called We Are Next. It was 4 Republicans, 2 Democrats. 2 Democrats, Jim Bernhardt, Scott Crawford. 4 Republicans, Wayne Grigsby, myself, my son, and Ronald McConnell. We worked hard to try to get or give support to law enforcement so that they could get a fair contract where they would have a living wage. And at the same time, we supported a person that we felt was qualified to lead this city, the capital of the state of Louisiana. 68% white, 32% black. And we elected Kip Holden, the first African American to serve as mayor of the capital of the state of Louisiana. That speaks of our community. We became a role model for the rest of the nation. During Alton Sterling and the ruling, again, we became a role model for the rest of the nation. And Cleve, it's because of people like your father who helped form the character of this parish. So again, I think we all are making good points, but this parish is a special parish, a special place to live. It's made of good quality people. And I want to thank you. Dwight was sitting here, you're representative, council representative for the job that y'all have done over the past few days, or that you did over the past few days to hold this committee. So thank you, and thank you for coming here today.
Thank you.
We're going to have two more comments. We're way over. And
You know, Woody, just to bring this back to the Alton Sterling case. And Edmond, you know this. You and I have over the years have had many cases together where I was a prosecutor and you were a defense attorney. We always treated each other fairly. And what was the one thing that we always saw? We always saw justice, right? We always saw justice. And the way we got to justice was we took the law and you and I would sit and we would talk about what the facts were. And we would put those together. And if they fit the elements of the statute, then we didn't have much more to talk about, did we? Either your guy pled or he went to trial, right? And if it didn't fit, what did you always get? You always got a fair shake. And that's what we need in this case right here, guys. Because let me tell you something. Where we are right now is there's a lot of speculation going on. There's what you think you know, and then there's the truth. And we don't all know the truth yet. We don't all know the truth yet. And I have all the confidence in the world that the Louisiana State Police is going to get to the bottom of it. They're going to get to the bottom of what was in Mr. Sterling's mind at the time that this went down. Look, the videos speak for themselves. Anybody can look at a video and have an opinion about it. Experts will differ, but the videos speak for themselves. What was in Mr. Sterling's mind and what was in his attitude at the time, what was in those two police officers' mind and attitude at the time, and that's going to be tested. Those facts are going to be tested against each other, and we're going to see at the end of the day whether those police officers reacted appropriately or they did not. And I believe Mr. Landry will make the right decision. I don't think he's going to play politics with this. I think he's going to make the right decision. And the facts are going to go before that grand jury, and that grand jury is going to have an opportunity to do justice.
Marty,
That's what I believe.
I hope you're right, but I want to impress upon the group that confidence that you have in our criminal justice system.
Yes.
I'll stick with our community. Our community does not have that confidence.
And we need to do more about encouraging everybody to have confidence in that system. That's why justice has got to prevail. That's why justice has got to prevail every time. When justice fails us, when justice doesn't prevail, then we lose confidence. So I appreciate what you guys are doing, but I would like, there's a lot of rhetoric about what could happen and what happened in this town, in this community, under different sets of facts. Bring it back. Let's quit worrying about all that, grandstanding about all that. Let's bring it back to this case. Let's let the process run its course, and let's see if we get justice.
But let me say this,
based on the facts.
No, but here's the thing. To that point, that's what we said from day one. Let the process play itself out. And,
yes.
And if you saw, even after the DOJ's decision, every attorney there, the family members, we all said again, let the process play out. We understand that there's another level to this process. And I would say Attorney General Landry met with the family yesterday.
There you go.
And so, you know, he's on top of it. And so we still have a process to play out. And so we understand that. And I think that's part of the reason why everything has been so calm right now, because everybody up here has stressed the fact that we need to let the process play out. Now, we might have there might be different confidences in the process, but everybody has said let this process play itself out.
All right, this is the last one is Boo Thomas here. Last one.
A lot of you know me in this room. I've been a community activist, servant, or whatever for a long time, and I thought that I understood these issues that you're talking about today very well. And when I would hear some of the comments, I would say, oh, come on, that's 400 years ago. I just finished my first session of dialogue on race, and I'll tell you, I didn't understand. So I'm part of this. I want to be part of a solution. So I'd like to challenge each one of you in this room to participate in dialogue on race. And I think we've got a lot to learn. And I, thought I really kind of knew the stuff. And I do not. And I learned more in my first session than I've known in many years. So I hope that could be part of a solution. And I think that's what you all are talking about today.
I want to thank our speakers today.